Specifically, we're going to talk about really virtual reality. So, Matt, you're at Samsung and you're running Milk VR. And I think for this audience, I think it'd be great to just kind of give everyone a level set of where VR is at on mobile today.
Sure. So we have really two things to clarify. So the first is we have a device called the Gear VR, which is the head-mounted display, if you will. A very simple system, mobile-based. You take your Samsung phone, you plug your phone in, you have the goggles, and instantly you can have VR. No additional hardware required. What Milk VR is a video service that basically supports what you can do inside Gear VR. We launched Milk VR really for three reasons, I would say. The first is we wanted to drive awareness and adoption of virtual reality. It was one of the first kind of public-facing devices. The second was we wanted to drive engagement. We wanted people to have something to do with a VR device once they went out and purchased one. And then the third thing was, which is really important for this discussion today, is we wanted to really innovate on the story side. We felt that it would help spur the ecosystem. It would get creative people like David and some of the other folks working with us to really start leaning in and start making original content, whether it's video, whether it's games, whether it's apps. So that was the sort of purpose behind all this and how the ecosystem works.
And the device now it's the Note 4 and
GS6. We have our second device in the market now, one for the larger phone form factor and one for the smaller phone.
Great. And then David, just because maybe not everyone knows Skybound Entertainment, but you guys are pioneering, The Walking Dead on television, interactive and games. And so now VR is here. What got you interested? Like what from the storytelling, your team, when they started seeing VR, what kind of went off in the creative minds?
I mean, so much for us about VR is that in linear storytelling, we're sort of always able to control where the audience is looking. So the basic challenge of saying, hey, we're going to tell this story in an environment, but we don't know where the audience is going to be looking was sort of a fantastic challenge for us. So we looked at that a little bit sort of as the difference between film and television. The audience is sort of passively experience it. And then when someone in an interactive experience, they're sort of more like an editor. You've given them sort of pre-assembled blocks and they get to choose sort of how to interact with it. And so VR is an entirely different experience where they're sort of more like a co-author alongside of you as you've sort of given them the world, but they're kind of choosing what story it is that they want to see.
In exploring that, I mean, did you find that your audience was like very keen to like get into VR, or are you just still sort of the very beginning stages of exploring it creatively? Have you kind of got into the audience's mind?
Yeah, I mean, for us, coming from the world of The Walking Dead, we have people that get so immersed into this world that literally we have people that go out, hunt squirrels, and send squirrel pie to Norman Reedus. So we have people that are really immersed in this universe that want to know pretty much every little detail that there is about it. So the idea of VR, where we can actually create a robust, immersive experience, that was sort of a good challenge for us.
Right. And so right now, you guys, we're all here because we're sort of starting to work together. You announced at CES that you were starting a project. Can you give a little bit of detail, or Samsung give a little bit of detail?
I'll let David talk about creative sound bites, and then we can talk a bit about how it all evolved and what the purpose is.
Yeah.
So we announced at CES that we were going to be doing a suspense thriller drama set in the world of VR. And now we can announce we started production on this yesterday. It is called
Why are we
Gone.
here?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be there.
Called Gone, and it's written and directed by a guy named J.T. Petty, who we've worked with before. What we love about J.T. is he's a writer, director. He's worked in film, television, video games, and books, so sort of knows the world of sort of different types of storytelling very well. He was the co-creator of Splinter Cell, a very successful video game. So it's been a huge opportunity for us to sort of work with him, and we're incredibly excited about working with Samsung and Milk VR.
It's great. And Samsung, like, you guys are going to be releasing this. This is new for you guys.
Yeah, and for us, it's very much uncharted territory, but it's exciting. And what I think, sort of on the big picture, what excites us about doing this with David is, I think in the past, you've always had sort of two constituents. You've had technology platforms on one side of the room, or on one side of California, if you will, and you've had creators who were in Southern California, the other side of the room. And very rarely, if you look at it historically, very rarely have they actually come together to develop in partnership. And so one of the things that we really wanted to try to explore, because virtual reality is so new, the storytelling is so different, and you have to really not only train people, but really get them hooked and engaged with, as David described, with this robust ecosystem. One of the things we really wanted to do was have those folks sit together. And so for us, the most rewarding part so far has been that we've actually had more conversations about technology and applications and less about casting and less about story. And that's not that it's not important, but to see David talking with our app folks to build a better service and kind of informing them of what types of feature sets and how we could enable these stories he wanted to tell. But then conversely, to see our app folks who don't speak that language sitting with David and helping him think through how he's going to storyboard this, how he's going to shoot it. We think that's a super exciting thing going forward, that if we can continue to build on that, it'll be kind of revolutionary, that you have creative people informing technology people and vice versa. And we think that's how we're going to get content that's going to make people pick up the device and buy it and really drive it, not just because it's great and entertaining, but because it does things that are different that you haven't seen before.
Yeah, so since VR is so new, it's like every step of the way it's creating a new technical problem to solve. And so you guys, as David's coming up with these
There's
story
no problems.
beats. No problems.
There's no
Easy.
problems. Everything's great.
Of course, but when let's say a story element requires some new technology, you guys are revving your product.
Yeah, I mean, so that we do that, and again, that's what's so interesting about the experience for us, which is typically you might have app folks that would do new app feature sets, and based on what our hardware is, how much what's our processing speeds, we would typically do that in the void. We wouldn't necessarily have it be informed by what storytellers want. And so what we've tried to do is open up that ecosystem and help those folks think about, well, what feature sets are really going to make for a better piece of content, whether it's video or game, and then we think that that's going to have a better product for us. And again, back to the same problem, we have to have 300 million Americans try VR, love VR, buy a device, and then really get into it as a new viewing behavior. So that it feels like it was the right choice for us to make to bring storytellers together with technologists.
Right, so the creatives driving the technology and hopefully that technology.
And vice versa, I would say.
Yeah. And so, you are we seeing the demand? I mean, we're hearing a lot of hype for VR. I mean, we're all very excited about it, but are we seeing the demand physically with the?
Oh, I would say so. I mean, we're being very, very cautious, I think, for a good reason, right? We've seen what's happened in the past with things like 3D TV. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure this is an innovators edition product. We want to make sure that we're not out there overhyping and telling people that you can global teleport to all kinds of places. But at the same time, we know that there's interest. We see it, we hear it. It's not just in the press. And so we want to make sure that we get the right partners on board and that we continue to build out that ecosystem and make it more of a better value prop for consumers, because they want to see what David's doing next. They want to see what the NBA is doing next and what some of the other partners who are making content in video are doing.
And with that, since you already have a lot of content live, we haven't gotten to see David's yet, but you're seeing the view times are extended or short? Like, how everyone went to the YouTube, but everyone said the videos have to be short. Have we seen anything that's emerging as a standard of length of time, or is it still unknown now?
Well, we made an educated guess that short form, and maybe you could even call it super short form, 1 to 3 to 4 minutes would be kind of the sweet spot early on. But again, we had to try a lot of different things. We have longer form pieces that are rating well. What we are seeing is a lot of repeat viewing, which is great.
Right.
And that's one of the promises of VR and of storytelling, which is of VR storytelling, which is it's never really the same thing twice. And if you can really augment that and capitalize on it, you'll end up with a better kind of sub-market for repeats and repeat viewing. And that's a big problem that the linear video folks are facing. How do you get people to watch over and over again? So we're seeing that type of behavior, and we're seeing people who just demand more and more content. So give me 10 3-minute videos, give me 1 30-minute video. We're just finding longer and longer view cycles, which is really encouraging.
I think, though, if you look at it, it always takes a medium a little while to find its natural form, right? If you look at when you went from radio to TV, the first thing they did is they just put radio shows on television, and that was sort of, didn't really work until they evolved into what we sort of know now as the normal half-hour format, the normal hour format. And then when we went from TV into the internet, when people started trying to fund, not sort of YouTube stuff, when trying to fund original content, they were basically trying to take TV shows and put them on the internet, and that didn't work either, right? So, I think what we've been trying to do and what we've looked at is, this is a new medium, so you have to figure out what is the format that's native to this environment, and sort of how does that work in such a way that it takes advantage of it? Because I think you mentioned before 3D television, right? The difference between, I think, VR and 3D TV, 3D is just an enhancement to an existing experience,
right,
where this is an entirely new medium and environment for storytelling.
Yeah, and so a question on that, on the creative. We hear a lot of people when they talk about VR, the experience, since it's immersive, they tend to walk out of those experiences saying, I really felt that story, And so when you guys were going through the process of trying to figure out the stories that you're going to do, did you take into account like how responsible we're going to be in the storytelling, because we know people are going to actually have such a visceral feeling about it?
I mean, to me, that the ability of making that connection, right? When I actually saw the first tech demo that I saw of the Milk VR, it was really sort of disconcerting, because I sort of came out, I knew what I was looking at wasn't real, but it felt intimate and real to me. And that was a very disconcerting experience. And I came out and I said that to Matt, and Matt's like, no, we're working on that. That's
prototype.
And I was like, no, that's great, right? Because as storytellers, we work so hard trying to get people to feel anything. Right. So if you can get people to feel something, even if it's a negative emotion, it's actually an amazing opportunity to tell story.
Yeah, so there is a kind of a responsibility, because you have such the ability to maybe spook somebody, to actually really.
I love that.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. So.
And that was one of the reasons why we felt, obviously virtual reality is very interesting to the creative community, but that was one of the reasons why we wanted to work with Skybound and David, because of the unique background. Right? It's not just an executive producer or TV or there's TV, there's games, there's just a sensibility, not to mention, books. There's a sensibility of more of a feeling of exploration. And we just said, what do you want to do creatively? How can you evolve this from kind of a fixed position, 360 environment to something where a story is kind of happening all around you? And our guys will go back and build it, and we'll work with great production companies and partners and platforms who can actually pull that together. So it's super early, right? I tell people it's 1940, right? But people watch black and white TV for 40 years and loved it. We don't have 40 years, we get that. And that's one of the reasons why, for us, the urgency, if you will, is to get great creators and great IP brands to come in and really start pushing the envelope and innovating together, because we don't have time to think of it ourselves and just wait. We really want to try to drive that ecosystem.
You mentioned it's early, but are you seeing it from both your guys' perspectives? Are you seeing VR move faster and sort of its adoption with creatives and the early adopters than other mediums that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just there's a true level of like visceral excitement about this in a way that there hasn't been with everything else. Whether it's 3D TV or 3D film, there's this whole movement of like, oh, how do we make the sensory experience of going to the movies or watching television sort of more exciting? And people are like, oh, film and TV kind of is what it is, right? Like it could be a better movie or a better show, but it's the same thing. I think about VR, people are like, this can be entirely something new. Right? It's not just a different length format of video. It's actually an entirely different experience. And I think that ability to sort of really create something new is the reason why I think everybody that we've been talking to is just jazzed to sort of work in the environment.
Yeah, we're obviously experiencing the same thing. And I would say that it is moving fast. Last week, I just sort of checked on some of the goals we had when we started about a year ago looking at this. And it was great to see that we had passed a lot of our internal checkpoints. That doesn't mean anything, right? We have to deliver on the promise, right? We have to harness and find the right partners to do that and make sure that it doesn't get overhyped, and that we really make a difference and create experiences that utilize the phone the best and utilize our software and hardware the best. So it's moving super fast. There's tons of interest in it, but again, to me, the big challenge is let's make sure we get it right and really innovate, because it's still early.
Yeah, I keep feeling the same thing. It's like, it's early, we want to slow it down, sort of the hype, but at the same time, we still see this.
But now we're hype, here we are, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So
we had 20 minutes, and I wanted to give the audience the ability to ask a couple questions, so we have 5 minutes left. Are there some questions for us in the audience? We got some mics going around. Anyone interested in asking some tough questions about VR and mobile? That sounds like it. We got one up here.
Plan.
A plan.
Hey guys, good to see you again. No. I'm wondering specifically, I haven't really experienced a lot of VR content, but what specifically changes as far as storytelling is concerned? It's still linear, it's much more immersive, but does the storytelling change practically, technically? How do you write content for VR? What changes?
So, I've grown up inside the film and TV industry, and there's hundreds of books and gurus that give you, and there's classes you can take on sort of classic story structure, right? So the 3-act structure. There's programs that have film and script templates in them that you could easily fill in. There is no template for what a VR script even looks like. So one of the things we did is we were trying to play with, so you're looking. There's a great test where there was a ghost that can come by a window, right? And the idea is that we could superimpose your face onto the ghost, right? So the idea is it only makes sense as if you're looking there. But the problem is we would often have people wouldn't see it. So they wouldn't be looking out the window. So then you're like, okay, well, how do we make it? We can, maybe we drop in a sound effect to make people turn. And then we found that they were looking for where the sound came from, not necessarily at the window. And so we were sort of like, okay, we can now make the ghost. So we just ended up in this place, whereas normally, if I want to show you a ghost in a window, I put the ghost in the window, I point the camera at it, and boom, I have a ghost in a window.
How do you lead people into that? And so for us, the way we think about that is it's really the 360 palette, right? That things are really happening behind you. And some of the more traditional folks out there that aren't as sort of innovative and open to new ideas as David would probably not want that, right? They would want to be able to tell you the story. You're going to look at that ghost. You're going to look at that image. I know better than you, and frankly, most of them do. But we think VR is a little bit different, and that's what's exciting. Is that you're not starting from kind of a one view. You have to account for 4 fields of view, and the more we can push that, and after we get done with this series, make another one and another one that come up with new ways to innovate. That's when I think we're going to get the moment where people say, I have to buy a VR device because there's something that I keep hearing about everywhere that I've never experienced before. It's really early, but that's what we're building toward, to try to get something that water cooler type of moment for content.
I think we got time for one more. There's one back there.
Could you build a little more on the user experience, both from a tactical and what equipment you're going to need? Is this a headset? Am I looking at the device? Just a little more flavor around what the experience will be for the end user.
Definitely.
Sure, I can take that at least from the basics, and forgive me if I didn't do a great job early on. It's basically a mobile phone that has an app on it. You plug the mobile phone into a goggle or device, as we call it, and instantly, the software in that device can read the app and read the content, and it takes a video that's playing on your screen and sort of wraps it around your head and makes it a 360-degree experience. It's a great thing for Samsung, I think, because it's a great use case for our hardware, right? We make 2K screens on your phone, hopefully making even higher resolution products. We have great processors. We're good at hardware. That's something that we've done traditionally. So the ability to kind of really fully use that and enhance what that viewing experience is a huge win for us. But we got to get the content right and the storytelling right, and that's why this partnership is unique to us. But that's kind of the basics. Did that answer your question? Okay, good.
One last one.
Hi, I had a quick question regarding the VR AR comparison. Do you plan on any component for AR, not just VR? Is that relevant within your current efforts here? And do you see a delineation there? And could you talk to that a little bit, please?
I really don't know. I'm focused primarily on just making sure Milk VR has great content, that we continue to innovate, that we continue to keep growing our audience in that world. But there's obviously a lot of interest in that outside of Samsung, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But I don't have the crystal ball, unfortunately. I wish I did.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, I think those two things are going to develop entirely separately, but in parallel, right? The idea being VR is an immersive experience where AR is easily layered onto an existing one, like at a museum or in the room that you're in now. So I actually love AR. I think it's a really exciting sort of way to dip your toe in the water, and there's actually probably huge applications for it. But from a storytelling perspective, the idea of doing something completely ubiquitous and immersive is sort of the biggest challenge for us, which is why we decided to go with these guys.